In the quaint suburb of Maplewood, where manicured lawns and picket fences formed the backbone of community charm, one figure loomed larger than the rest: Karen Thompson. As an influential member of the Homeowners Association, she prided herself on being the self-appointed guardian of neighborhood standards. With her oversized sunglasses perched on her nose and a clipboard always in hand, Karen patrolled the streets as if they were her dominion. Her reputation for enforcing every minutiae of HOA rules preceded her, striking fear into the hearts of residents who dared to tread outside her narrow interpretation of propriety. Karen had perfected her role as enforcer, enjoying the power it granted her. The sound of her heels clicking against pavement echoed her authority as she made rounds, ready to pounce on any perceived infractions or what she saw as threats to her version of communal harmony. To her, a neatly trimmed hedge was more than just a shrub; it was a symbol of order that must be upheld at all costs. This obsession with control extended to security matters, where she viewed home surveillance cameras not as tools for safety but as unwelcome intrusions into privacy. When new residents, the Martinez family, moved into a charming two-story home on Maple Street and installed security cameras to protect their property, Karen saw red. She stormed over, armed with HOA rules and an air of self-righteous indignation. "Those cameras violate our bylaws," she declared sternly, pointing to clauses that spoke vaguely about aesthetics and privacy concerns. For Karen, it wasn't merely about rule enforcement, it was about exerting dominance over anyone who dared defy her. The Martinez family felt cornered. They had chosen this neighborhood for its safety and community spirit but found themselves face to face with a bully brandishing official-looking papers like weapons. Reluctantly, they complied with Karen's demands to remove their cameras, fearful of escalating tensions in an already fraught situation. As they took down those cameras, symbols of their family's security, their unease was palpable. For Karen, victory tasted sweet. Little did she know that karma had other plans waiting just around the corner. The Martinez family had just settled into their home, a serene two-story nestled among the leafy streets of Maplewood. As newcomers, they were thrilled by the neighborhood's charm and friendly faces. Among the many reasons for their move was the need for a safe haven. After all, they had young children to protect. When they installed security cameras to monitor their property, it felt like a prudent decision, a small safeguard against potential threats in an unpredictable world. However, Karen Thompson's arrival shattered that sense of security. The Martinez family quickly learned that her watchful eye extended far beyond mere appearances. Within days, Karen was on their doorstep, her demeanor as rigid as the rules she enforced. Standing there with clipboard in hand, she scrutinized the cameras as if they were invasive plants sprouting in a pristine garden. "These cameras have to go," she declared with unwavering authority, citing vague HOA privacy regulations while failing to acknowledge the family's genuine concern for safety. Anxiety began to coil around them. Each family member had their own fears. The children worried about intruders, while the parents pondered if they had made a mistake in choosing this neighborhood. They had always imagined a home where their family could thrive without constant worry, yet here they were, feeling cornered and vulnerable. The idea of stripping away their surveillance felt like conceding to a reality they hoped to escape. Despite their initial resistance, the threat of retaliation loomed large over their decision-making process. Karen had made it clear that any defiance would lead to fines or further confrontations. It was evident she wielded power over the community like a scepter. Faced with the choice of standing firm or caving to pressure, the Martinez family felt compelled to prioritize harmony over their own security needs. They complied reluctantly, dismantling the very protections designed to keep their children safe from harm, all under the watchful gaze of their overbearing neighbor. Their apprehension grew as they considered what might happen next, safety now sacrificed on the altar of neighborhood approval. Little did they know that this sacrifice would resonate far beyond just their family. It was only a matter of time before circumstances took an ironic turn, revealing that true safety often lies in being prepared for anything, even unexpected consequences. The tension in Maplewood was palpable as Karen Thompson returned to the Martinez home, her heels clicking ominously against the pavement. This time, she wasn't just pointing out violations, she was ready for confrontation. The sun hung low in the sky, casting elongated shadows that mirrored the unease creeping over the Martinez family. They gathered in their living room, exchanging anxious glances as Karen's confident knock echoed through their home. When they opened the door, Karen stood there, chin raised and clipboard poised like an armament of authority. "I see you still have those cameras up," she said with a sharp edge to her voice, immediately dominating the space. "I'm here to remind you that this is a violation of our community's privacy standards." Her tone left no room for negotiation. "Karen, we're just trying to protect our kids," Mr. Martinez replied, his voice steady but laced with frustration. He glanced at his wife and children huddled behind him, their expressions a mix of fear and disbelief at the relentless approach of their neighbor. "That's exactly the problem," Karen shot back, undeterred by his appeal. "Your security measures make everyone else feel unsafe. You're not above community rules just because you think you know better." Each word dripped with condescension as she waved her clipboard dismissively. Mrs. Martinez stepped forward cautiously. "We complied because we thought it was best for our family, but we never meant to upset anyone." She attempted a conciliatory tone, hoping to diffuse the mounting aggression. Karen cut her off mid-sentence. "Upset? It's about maintaining order. If everyone took matters into their own hands like you are doing, this neighborhood would descend into chaos." Her eyes blazed with conviction as if she believed every word she said. As the confrontation escalated, Mr. Martinez felt himself retreating into a corner, caught between a desire to defend his family's safety and the oppressive force of Karen's manipulative tactics. The atmosphere grew thick with anxiety as Karen leaned closer, her finger pointed accusingly at them. It felt as though she were not just enforcing rules but asserting control over their very lives. With every moment that passed, it became increasingly clear, compliance wasn't just about appeasing one neighbor, it was about bending under pressure from an authority figure who thrived on intimidation. The Martinez family felt trapped in a web woven by Karen's aggressive stance, leaving them questioning whether their home was indeed a safe haven or merely a battleground for power dynamics they hadn't anticipated entering. The decision loomed heavily over the Martinez family as they faced the harsh reality of Karen's ultimatum. Reluctantly, they stepped outside, the summer sun beating down on them, but it felt more oppressive than ever. Each member of the family grappled with their own frustration and helplessness as the time came to dismantle the very cameras that had been installed to shield them from potential danger. Mr. Martinez grabbed the ladder, his heart pounding with a mix of anger and trepidation. The idea of removing their security cameras was like conceding defeat and admission that their peace depended solely on Karen's interpretation of neighborhood rules. He climbed higher, wrenching the first camera from its mount, but with every turn of the screwdriver, he felt as though he was stripping away their very safety net. He stole a glance at his wife and children, their anxious faces watching from below, and felt a bittersweet pang in his chest. He swallowed hard, trying to suppress both his anger and the ominous feeling settling over him. Mrs. Martinez held her breath as each camera came down. She wanted to believe it was just a temporary measure, a slight compromise for the sake of avoiding conflict with Karen. Yet deep down, fear seeped into her thoughts. What if something happened while they were unprotected? Would their dreams of a safe home with happy memories fade into shadows? As each camera disappeared into a box, she caught herself feeling less secure and more vulnerable. She could hear Karen's voice echoing in her mind, taunting her with claims of maintaining community standards, while dismissing their legitimate concerns as paranoia. "What kind of community is this if we aren't allowed to protect ourselves?" she muttered under her breath, her frustration bubbling just below the surface. The children, too young to fully comprehend the situation, simply sensed that something was wrong. They watched their parents struggle with this impossible choice, their innocence blending into the atmosphere thick with tension. "Why are we taking them down?" one of them finally asked, eyes wide with confusion. "Because it's what we have to do for now," Mrs. Martinez replied, struggling to keep her voice steady. "It's complicated." But was it really? As she surveyed the now empty spots where cameras once hovered, she knew that what truly complicated matters was living under the constant thumb of Karen's perceived authority. With every camera removed, they felt as if they were not just dismantling devices designed for security, but dismantling their sense of safety altogether. The ache of compliance settled in, the resignations to peace over safety seemed increasingly unjust in a place they had hoped would be a sanctuary. As they closed the door behind them one last time, anxiety thrummed through their home like a haunting melody, signaling that this battle was far from over. Karen Thompson stood in her immaculate living room, satisfaction radiating from her as she admired her surroundings. With the sun gleaming through the large bay windows, illuminating the pristine decor, she felt a sense of triumph wash over her.
After weeks of confrontation with the Martinez family, she had successfully enforced her interpretation of HOA regulations, and the neighborhood once again felt under her control. The absence of those security cameras gave her a sense of victory she couldn't shake. Striding through the yard, she took a deep breath of fresh air, convinced that she had safeguarded the community from prying eyes and potential discord. "Who needs cameras anyway?" she murmured to herself with a self-satisfied smile. "Privacy is paramount." In her mind, Karen believed that removing what she called invasive surveillance was not only her duty but also an act of heroism for Maplewood. To her, those cameras represented a breakdown in communal trust, each lens capturing not just homes but the very essence of neighborhood harmony. As she imagined how her neighbors would thank her for restoring their privacy, a false sense of security enveloped her. Karen envisioned herself as the protector of societal standards, the vigilant overseer actively maintaining peace. The blurred boundary between authority and arrogance seemed non-existent to her. She was blind to how quickly power could become intoxicating. She made rounds throughout the neighborhood, greeting residents who shared polite smiles and nods. In those moments, Karen reveled in their approval, believing herself to be their advocate and guardian. She even stopped to chat with Mrs. Jenkins, an elderly neighbor known for her unwavering support of the HOA's rules. "Isn't it nice how quiet things are without those unsightly cameras disturbing our streets?" Karen mused, basking in praise. "Absolutely," Mrs. Jenkins replied enthusiastically. "It feels so much safer now." Little did they know that safety often stemmed from preparedness rather than ignorance. Yet beneath this facade of security lay a growing complacency as Karen's belief in her authority began to blind her to real threats lurking just outside the boundaries of her perfect neighborhood. Unbeknownst to her, what she labeled as protection against chaos could become an unintended invitation for danger, one that would soon shatter the bubble of tranquility she had so carefully constructed. The irony loomed just out of sight. True vigilance came from recognizing the need for security rather than stifling it altogether. As Karen continued to celebrate what she perceived as order restored, fate was already scheming its own lesson in humility. The evening sky darkened over Maplewood, casting long shadows across Karen Thompson's well-manicured lawn. She settled into her favorite armchair, a glass of wine in hand, still basking in the afterglow of her recent triumph over the Martinez family. The house was quiet, an oasis of calm that lulled her into a false sense of security. "Everything is as it should be," she murmured contentedly to herself, oblivious to the dangers lurking just outside her slice of paradise. However, as night descended, that illusion shattered into fragments. A muffled noise, a faint thud, echoed from somewhere near the back of her house. Karen's heart raced as the realization began to dawn on her: something wasn't right. She paused, straining to listen further, but all she could hear was the pounding in her chest. The absence of security cameras felt like a gaping hole in her defenses. Tentatively, she rose from her chair, setting the glass down with a slight tremor. "It's probably just the wind," she reassured herself, although the creeping apprehension told another story. Steeling herself, Karen made her way toward the sound. Each step reverberated in the empty hallway like the foreboding tolling of a bell. As she reached the kitchen doorway, a sudden crash sent adrenaline coursing through her veins. Without thinking, she flipped on the lights and peered inside, only to find chaos unfolding before her eyes. A figure clad in dark clothing was rifling through her cabinets and tossing items aside in search of valuables. Panic seized her as she realized what was happening. She was being robbed. "Stop! Get out!" Karen shouted, her voice trembling even as she tried to sound authoritative. But instead of retreating, the intruder turned and locked eyes with her, a wild mix of surprise and disdain crossing their features before they bolted toward the back door. Karen stood paralyzed for a moment, disbelief stinging at her senses. All those times she had dismissed security cameras as unnecessary had led to this very moment. The lack of footage would render any chance of identification futile. Her mind raced with thoughts that spiraled into regret. If only they had cameras installed. Frantically grabbing her phone, she dialed 911 with shaking fingers while glancing at her reflection in the darkened window, a stark reminder that she had stripped away not only her own defenses but also those of potential protection for others in the neighborhood. As chaos unfolded around her and sirens wailed in the distance, reality crashed down hard. What she viewed as safeguarding privacy had transformed into an invitation for danger right at her doorstep. This wasn't just an attack on her home,
it was a reckoning for every reckless decision made under a guise of authority, and now it was too late to turn back. Karen's heart raced as she cradled her phone, desperately waiting for the 911 operator to respond. Each passing second felt like an eternity, the silence in her house oppressive and suffocating. The initial shock of confronting the burglar lingered like a nightmare, but this was a new wave of terror crashing down on her. What would she tell the police? How could they locate the intruder without video footage? Please, answer, she muttered to herself, her palms sweaty and trembling as she tapped her foot anxiously on the floor. The house was disheveled, kitchen drawers lay open, utensils scattered about, who knew what valuables had been taken? Her mind spun in circles at the thought of everything she had worked so hard for now jeopardized. Finally, a calm voice broke through the line, and Karen rushed to explain her situation, though her words tumbled out in a frantic rush. The more she spoke, the more she felt like a cornered animal, her desperation clawed at her throat. As she detailed the break-in, her mind fixated on the glaring absence of evidence that could help identify the thief. "There's no footage," she exclaimed, panic rising in her voice. "I don't have security cameras, no way to catch them. I thought they were invading my privacy." Realization sank deeper, smothering her in guilt. She had rid herself of necessary safeguards, all in the name of perceived order. Would her neighbors even care when they heard about the theft? Or would they relish in the karma that had befallen their relentless HOA member? Karen winced at the idea, the thought plagued her with a complex mix of humiliation and dread. Once off the call, she wandered through her devastated kitchen, her hands shaking as she surveyed the scene. Memories invaded her thoughts, family dinners and laughter that now felt tainted by a sense of loss. She felt vulnerable and exposed. Suddenly, her tidy home seemed like nothing more than a house of cards ready to collapse. Suddenly, it dawned on her that she might need to reach out to the Martinez family for help. Just thinking about it made bile rise in her throat. Would she still hold any authority or respect after this? With each passing moment, it became clear that the same rules she imposed so rigidly on others had now failed to protect her. Anxiety spiraled within her. Fear was no longer just an abstract concept but an overwhelming reality that threatened to engulf her completely. She felt unmoored, a once powerful figure now reduced to desperation as echoes of sirens filled the distance, drawing nearer with every breath. The echoes of sirens faded into the distance, leaving Karen Thompson alone in the aftermath of the chaos that had invaded her home. The weight of her decisions pressed down on her like an anvil, and as she paced the living room, anxiety gnawed at her insides. She felt exposed and vulnerable, a far cry from her previous self-assured demeanor. The thought of having to ask the Martinez family for help made bile rise in her throat, but desperation clawed at her mind with relentless ferocity. Finally, she picked up her phone, fingers trembling as she dialed their number. Each ring felt like a drum roll heralding her impending humiliation. Would they even pick up? Would they remember the way she had bullied them into submission? She hesitated, but as another wave of panic washed over her, she realized she had no choice. "Hello," came Mr. Martinez's cautious voice on the other end. The warmth and kindness that once greeted her felt like a distant memory now. Hi, it's Karen," she managed to say, forcing the words out despite the knot forming in her throat. I need your help." The admission cut deep. It felt foreign to seek assistance from someone she had so ruthlessly oppressed. There was a brief silence on the line before Mr. Martinez replied, a hint of surprise evident in his tone. "Is everything all right?" "No. It's not." Karen's voice cracked under the strain. "I was robbed, and I don't have any security cameras to catch who did it." She could practically hear him processing what she had just revealed. Everything they had discussed just days before now flipped on its head. The weight of vulnerability hung heavy between them as Karen continued, "I know you have cameras. I was wrong to make you take yours down." Each confession felt like a stinging slap against her pride. It was hard to admit that her previous stance on security had left her defenseless. "Karen," he replied slowly, his tone surprisingly calm. "We can help you set up cameras again if you'd like. We just want everyone in the neighborhood to feel safe." An unexpected wave of gratitude washed over her as relief mingled with humiliation. In that moment, Karen finally acknowledged how misguided her actions had been. she had worked so hard to maintain control and uphold an image of authority that she failed to see the importance of community support and safety. As they discussed logistics for installing new cameras together, Karen couldn't shake off the feeling that this experience would forever change their relationship and perhaps even reshape how she viewed authority itself. The very person she once sought to belittle was now becoming her ally in protecting a neighborhood that desperately needed unity, even if it took an unexpected robbery to finally see it. As Karen Thompson hung up the phone, the weight of her recent admission hung heavily in the air. The realization that she had to rely on the very family she had oppressed was a bitter pill to swallow. Flashes of memories from her confrontations with the Martinez family filled her mind, her authoritative stance, the condescending tone, and the countless times she dismissed their right to protect themselves. Now, sitting alone in her devastated home, those moments felt like chains binding her to a version of herself she no longer wanted to recognize. With each passing minute, clarity began to creep in like dawn breaking over a long night. Karen wrapped her arms around herself as if trying to shield her vulnerability from the universe. She had spent so much energy enforcing rules and exerting control that she had neglected to consider how her actions affected others. The realization hit her hard. She hadn't just stripped away their sense of safety, she had built a wall of fear and resentment that now loomed over her own life. As she looked around at the disarray, the overturned furniture, the broken glass, the evidence felt like a mirror reflecting back her own chaotic decisions. This was not merely about theft, it was about trust and community. In striving to maintain an illusion of order, she had forgotten that true strength lies in support and collaboration. Her desire for control had backfired spectacularly, leaving her stranded in a whirlwind of regret. She thought about the Martinez children and how they must have felt when their cameras were taken down, their parents helpless and anxious. How many nights had they gone to bed wishing for more protection? The very thought made Karen's stomach turn. She could feel shame creeping into her heart. She realized how deeply misguided her vision of community had been, one where harmony was enforced through fear rather than nurtured through understanding and cooperation. In this moment of reflection, Karen felt an urge to make amends, to rebuild what she had so carelessly torn down. It wasn't just about installing cameras but creating a culture of safety and collaboration. She understood now that seeking assistance from the very people she once bullied was not a sign of weakness but an opportunity for redemption. Karen picked up her phone again, prepared to reach out to the Martinez family not just for help with security but also to express her genuine desire to foster a more supportive community. As she dialed their number, Karen felt a flicker of hope. Maybe this could become a turning point not just for her but for everyone in Maplewood. The journey ahead stretched uncertainly before her, but for the first time, she felt willing to embrace change. The next evening, Karen stood nervously at the Martinez family's doorstep, her heart pounding as she recalled her previous confrontations with them. After dialing their number and discussing the installation of new security cameras, this visit felt like a pivotal moment, a chance to make amends. When the door swung open, Mr. Martinez greeted her with a cautious smile. "Karen," he said, his voice warm yet cautious. "I wasn't expecting you." "I know," she replied, her voice shaky. "I wanted to apologize in person for how I treated your family before. I realize now that my actions were misguided." She took a deep breath, summoning courage. "I thought I was protecting our community by enforcing rules, but I see now that I was just instilling fear and division." Mr. Martinez nodded slowly, his expression softening. "It takes a lot to admit that. We all want to feel safe in our homes." His understanding tone encouraged her to continue. "I've learned the hard way that privacy shouldn't come at the expense of safety," she continued, looking directly into his eyes. "Without those cameras, my own home was vulnerable, and now I understand how you must have felt when you had to remove yours." As they discussed the logistics of reinstalling cameras together, Karen felt the weight of their history slowly lift. She saw in Mr. Martinez's responses a willingness to help and rebuild trust, a stark contrast to the hostility that had characterized their previous encounters. Later that week, as they installed the cameras together in both homes, a collaborative effort rather than an imposition, Karen felt a sense of unity blossoming between them. The Martinez children watched curiously from the porch, their faces lighting up with hope as they witnessed their parents working amicably with Karen. "What if we had neighborhood meetings?" Karen suggested tentatively as they finished up. We could discuss community safety measures and allow everyone to share their ideas without fear or intimidation. Mr. Martinez smiled broadly. That sounds like a great start, Karen. We can work together on this. In that moment, Karen realized that true leadership wasn't about enforcing rules from a place of authority, it was about fostering an environment where everyone felt valued and heard. The lessons learned through her missteps were stark but vital. Respect for individual rights and the importance of community support could not be understated. As they wrapped up for the day, Karen felt hopeful about the changes ahead, not just for herself but for Maplewood as well. The journey toward building a safer community together was just beginning, but this time it was rooted in understanding and compassion rather than fear, an unexpected reward blossoming out of karma's lesson learned at last.